So looking at my clock, it's 12:30. So this is the start of the lunchtime webinar that we've been publicising over the past couple of weeks. So I'd like to welcome the people that have joined us today and taken a little bit of time out of their day to listen to some sage words from two experienced individuals we have with us today. And today we have Elcho Hofstede from LeaseWeb, UK Managing Director of LeaseWeb. And we also have Peter Osborne, who's founder and chairman of Flexion MSP. And as the title of today's webinar may or may not suggest, are clouds moving faster than you? Today we're talking about some practical insights into how organizations are and can make the most of the cloud in, I think what we'll all agree, is some very unusual and uncertain times. So without any further speak from me, I think it's time that we should hand over to Elcho. And Elcho, if you can start your presentation.
I will tell a little bit first about myself, and then I hope that it explains why I will tell a bit about this topic. I work for LeaseWeb for over 9 years, but before that I've been in all kinds of hosting companies and other sales roles, but always technical IT, technical sales kind of roles. My current role is being managing director for LeaseWeb in the UK, but I started my career at LeaseWeb as an account manager, later on sales manager, and now then managing director for LeaseWeb in the UK. As you can hear in my accent, I'm Dutch. LeaseWeb is a Dutch founded company, and we only recently started up business in London. That was in 2018. I've created many business cases with customers to move them from on-premise or from co-location towards cloud. And that is actually the topic that I would like to discuss a bit further today. What I would like to do is to share 3 challenges that I've discussed many times with customers, and then how to build a business case to make a positive business case to overcome these challenges. The 3 challenges that I would like to discuss is actually the first one is that you have a few servers, and where I say a few, it might also be hundreds of servers. It doesn't matter so much. Somewhere in your basement of your office or anywhere else, not being in a data center, and you want to also be able to benefit a bit from cloud instances. However, as you have made huge investments in your server farm, it will be hard for you to make a positive business case, because to completely depreciate all your investments from tomorrow onwards, that's normally not the way to make a positive business case. Another challenge that you might recognize is that you have invested significantly in capex, so same as in the first challenge, but the stuff is already hosted in a data center. Most of these servers are still under support and not even halfway their depreciation. But you still would like to start using cloud, which can be very difficult to do, or at least from a financial perspective. And the last one is a slightly different one, but the same tricks that I will share with you in a few minutes to overcome challenge 1 and 2 can also work to overcome challenge 3, which is you are currently running in a cloud at one of the hyperscalers, but your costs get completely out of control. And what can you do to stabilize the cost, or preferably even reduce the cost, well, while you keep the same performance at least? So these 3 challenges I would like to discuss in a bit more detail. Yeah, the answer that we normally have for these 3 challenges is to start using hybrid cloud. Now, what is hybrid cloud? We make a difference between multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. The difference is in multi-cloud, you have several clouds, and a cloud can also be your on-premise situation. In this case, I would also refer to it as a cloud, just a bubble of a group of servers somewhere. With multi-cloud, they are completely separated and there's no communication between them other than the internet. If you have a hybrid cloud, you can easily have set up VLANs or LANs between your hybrid, between your different clouds. So why does this technology help you in making a positive business case? So what you can do, let's go back to the challenge that we discussed, challenge 1, where you have a server farm in your basement, which is connected to the internet, but that's all, and you want to move to cloud. Well, in that case, what you could consider is taking a direct connect to one of the hyperscalers. Well, in most cases, that's very expensive, but I would always recommend to also try that and see if that works in your situation. Or the other option is to lift and shift your server farm to a data center and start co-location there. Within that data center, you can then, if you select the right data center, of course, you can then you'll then be able to get a connection to one of the hyperscalers or maybe several hyperscalers. That way, this way, you can slowly start migrating to cloud, because once you have that connection to a hyperscaler, and be honest, in some cases, and actually I've seen many cases, where the connection towards that cloud does not even has to be a real dedicated connection. Sometimes a VPN can already be enough. And then once you have that connection to that cloud, you can start slowly moving to that cloud. But you're only going to do that once you have fully depreciated the server in your co-location setup, which means that in most cases, the depreciation of the whole server farm will not happen at the same moment. So this means that you have a slow migration, and only once something is depreciated, you're going to move that part to the cloud. And that way you can slowly migrate. In some cases, you will not be able to connect to one of the hyperscalers, but there are also providers who can help you out with having co-location and cloud in the same data center and set up a connection between them. And that's how we have helped many customers of LeaseWeb by connecting their co-location racks to one of our clouds or to one of the hyperscalers. This way, well, the challenge 1 and 2 are in that sense a bit similar. The only difference is that in challenge 1 you might already have to move to the data center, but once you're in the data center, the solution is actually the same for both challenges. Then challenge 3 is a quite different one. You are currently hosted at one of the hyperscalers. Sorry. You're currently hosted at one of the hyperscalers, but your cost gets completely out of control. What we have seen specifically in the last few years is that more and more customers who moved in 2013-14 from more traditional hosting companies towards the cloud and who are now fully hosted at one of the hyperscalers are slowly moving parts of their infrastructure back to other providers. And the reason for that in many cases is either a lack of performance, either they feel completely locked in, or their cost gets completely out of control. And that is the most common reason that I've heard in the past few years. How can that happen? Well, one of the reasons is that within the hyperscalers, you will see that in many cases you have a pay-as-you-go payment setup, which sounds great because you're only going to use what you're only going to pay what you use, but the disadvantage can be that it can become extremely expensive. Next to that, probably you've set up your infrastructure in such a way that it automatically scales and scales down when needed. And therefore, if you have really high peaks, it might get completely out of control. Another case where it might be interesting to look to other providers instead of staying at the hyperscalers is if you need more performance and you have some parts of your infrastructure that need more performance than you can get at the hyperscalers, then you might be able to find other providers being able to offer that high performance for that specific database or for your specific application, because you have a high compute application, for example. Well, then you can decide to keep most of your infrastructure at the hyperscaler and only move that specific load, that specific workload to another provider. And again, the solution to do that can be hybrid cloud. In that case, the business case is normally pretty easy to make. So for the business case part, I will mainly go into challenge 1 and 2. Because making a business case to go from co-location or from on-premise towards cloud can be extremely hard. Because not only because financially it's hard to do. What I've seen with a lot of our customers is that the first version of their business case does not take all cost into account, and you will be moving from a more CapEx model towards a more OpEx model, which means that you get a monthly fee, and for that you get either dedicated servers or you get a certain amount of cloud. While in the past you were used to spend CapEx at the beginning of 3 years, and at the end it was completely depreciated. So what should be always in your business case if you want to move from, let's say, co-location towards a cloud? Well, of course, first of all, the cost of buying the equipment. Let me start with something else, which I now forgot. The cost normally to go to a hyperscaler or to go to another cloud provider like LeaseWeb is normally based on a monthly commit. So that cost is pretty clear. If it's purely on pay-as-you-go, it can be hard to calculate that as well. But that's not something I can really put in a business case. So we're going to compare, for this example, we're going to compare the total spend in 3 years for a monthly commit compared, or maybe a yearly commit, compared to the CapEx cost that you have if you start in co-location or on-premise. So for the cloud part, the part where it's just a monthly price, it's pretty easy. It's just 36 times the monthly commit, the monthly recurring revenue, and then you know your total cost. But on the other side, to compare the CapEx part in the co-location bit, that can be hard. Well, of course, first of all, you need to take the cost of buying the equipment. Next to that, but everybody normally takes that part. But that means that you spend all your money in the beginning. That also means that the company is missing all that CapEx for a period of 3 years. And you should compare that with an OpEx model where you just slowly spend the money over the 3 years. So you miss a bit of interest, but you also miss all the cash. Another thing that should be taken into account is that you will have higher costs because you will have to have your own spares. So it's not only the equipment that you need, but you need at least one piece of, for each piece of equipment, you need a spare, specifically for parts that break pretty often, like RAM or disks, but also your network equipment. I would definitely recommend spares. Or the other option is that you take a specific support contract with one of your vendors, but then you should really make sure that your vendor can do a fast replacement. Another part which should be always in your business case is the cost of licenses. This is sometimes pretty hard to compare because normally a lot of vendors have different models for if you have certain application licenses or OS licenses like Windows or VMware. If you have it on your own equipment or if you have it in a monthly commit via a provider. So it's important to take all these costs together and to make sure that you're comparing apples with apples. So the software licenses should always be part of your business case. And then there is the bullet point that I almost always miss in business cases where customers want to go from colo to cloud, and that's the cost to have 24/7 support. Specifically, companies who don't have a huge server farm, they normally have one or two people looking after their infrastructure, which to me already tells that it's not possible to offer proper 24/7 support. To do that, you need at least 3 employees, and to be honest, that's already actually very low. I would say you actually need 7 employees to do a full shift every 8 hours, change the shift. But with an engineer on duty, so not someone who's really in your data center, but with an engineer on duty, you might be able to lower the 7 to maybe a minimum of 3. However, if you have an engineer on duty, he might be sleeping, he might not be able to wake up because he didn't hear his phone. All kinds of issues can occur. So that's an important part to also take into your business case, the cost of having enough support. And if you don't have enough IT staff to do 24/7 support, then you should add a certain amount for the risk that it takes that you don't have that 24/7 support. So if you have a web shop, for example, and you know that every hour you're having you have a revenue stream of let's say £10,000 an hour, that would mean that if you're 1 hour offline, you miss already £10,000. So in that case, that risk should be added into your business case. And the last one, which should always be in your business case, is the cost of training your IT staff on hosting technologies. It can be VMware, it can be Windows, it can be Cisco trainings or other network supplier trainings. But you definitely will have to train your staff quite often to make sure that your staff still is aware of the new technologies and the newest features. This is not an exclusive list. Sometimes, in some cases, you will have to add even more. If you go to colocation, for example, you should also add the cost for the colocation data center. And there are more things to add, but these are some common parts of business cases that where I was part of that I saw some of these items missing, but for 100% sure it should be all of these should be in your business case. So if you then have created that business case, then there is a last bit which you should take into account, and that's the migration. How will you migrate, and are there any migration costs involved once you move from colocation to cloud? Well, of course, that will take a bit of time of your engineers, so that part you should take into account. But if you do it the way like I earlier described in a hybrid cloud, then you can grow slowly, which is not a big bang, and that normally takes away a lot of the migration cost. So what can LeaseWeb do for you in these cases? Well, LeaseWeb offers colocation, dedicated servers, and cloud. So we can help you if you bring your on-premise farm into our colocation. We can help you slowly growing into dedicated servers or maybe even one of our clouds. But we can also help you to connect to one of the hyperscalers, and then you can have a hybrid cloud setup where, for example, you have a base load within LeaseWeb, and your peak load you can move to one of the hyperscalers, which means that you don't have to invest all capex, all of your capex just for a few peaks in the year. We can support you in making a positive business case for your infrastructure needs in sense of how to move from your current situation towards the new. And LeaseWeb can also, in collaboration with Flexion, offer normally LeaseWeb itself only offers support until the operating system level, but in collaboration with Flexion MSP, we can also offer full application support, OS support, and all kinds of additional MSP services. We do this already for many customers, mainly in the EdTech, MarTech, Health Tech, FinTech industries, gaming industry, but we also work a lot with MSPs like Flexion. If you have any question about what I've just described, feel free to add it into the Q&A. And then we will discuss them later on. First, I would like to introduce you to Peter, who will now take over the presentation.
Thank you very much, Elcho, and welcome everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the subject we have for today, and share some thoughts along the same topics as Elcho. I've spent a career working with early stage companies coming to market, working in venture capital, as well as advising boards, and Flexion, together with its advisory service, Osborne Technology Partners, we help businesses come to market. We help businesses embrace cloud technology and get the most out of it. And we work with some businesses from what I would call a whiteboard startup, just a founder and an idea, right the way through to large enterprises. And we combine an understanding of business strategy and how it needs to resonate with technology strategy. So we look very carefully at the leading edge of where things are moving and why, to try and understand where we need to be with our customers for the future. And goodness me, this is a time of immense change. In the time I've been in business, it always seemed fast, but I don't think anything was like the acceleration of today. And it seems to me we've had 5 years of change in the last 5 months. And the good thing is, I think that we now broadly understand what the future probably looks like, at least in the medium term. A lot of these things, they were on the cards anyway. They were going to happen sooner or later. It's just that they've happened at lightning speed. And this sets the agenda for tech-enabled businesses very clearly. Everybody's online like we are right now. And change is here and is likely to stay. This is a world where the future is hard to see in its detail, and we need to be able to respond to that. Clearly, we need performance and resilience because we're trying to offer service to our customers, and we have to have effective businesses and costs under control. And one of the things that we see also is that the increased dependency on data, it always was important, but now it's fundamental and it's deep. That dependency has brought a new, a renewed visibility for data security. So where does all this take us in terms of the cloud? Well, back in the day, first generation was, let's start using cloud. Some companies started to move things into the cloud. Some jumped straight in, some started testing. And gradually that moved to a second generation approach, which was to put everything in the cloud. And typically we put everything in Azure or Amazon or Google or whatever it was. We just put everything in there, and that was the approach. And those early steps, those first 2 generations, were all about new business models, greater convenience for tech-enabled businesses and their customers, and greater efficiency. And as Eltio has been saying, when you actually look at the business case, there are some compelling reasons to be in the cloud. But that was then. And now the world has moved on, and we climb up this staircase of performance with some new vigor. We're looking at fast change happening all the time. We're looking at customers who are depending completely on technology. It's not a nice to have, it's a we need it for our line of business. That's bringing a greater complexity of services, and for us in the tech community, as an opportunity for growth and scale, lots of opportunities. So this brings these new opportunities right to the forefront, gives us new drivers and new imperatives that we must respond to as decision makers. So we compare that with what the second generation cloud gave us, and there's cost issues that Eltio has been talking about. There's support. How do we do that? Some customers like one, but not another. How do we cope with different customers with different demands and requirements? What happens about us getting locked in? Our experience is that some of these clouds have got very sophisticated techniques for drawing you in and keeping you there. How do we respond to that as business decision makers when flexibility for all this change is one of the things we're after? Well, dynamic cloud is here. Dynamic cloud is how we at Flexion describe the world of the cloud in the future. This gives us rapid delivery, the performance and security we're after, the flexibility and scalability to respond to opportunity, plenty of independence so that we don't get locked in, keen cost optimization, and above all, for decision makers, choice and control. If you haven't got choice and control in times of rapid change, then you have real problems to respond to. Dynamic cloud could be multi-cloud. It could be the hybrid cloud that Eltio has talked. It could be private cloud, and it could be all sorts of things. It may be we're integrating services from elsewhere. We're doing a pick and mix. We're saying we'll put this bit of our workload in that cloud, and we'll take this service and that service and the other service from other places and combine them all into a dynamic cloud that we use for our business and takes us wherever we need to go. And well, this is interesting, isn't it? Just over the horizon, we can see what's coming our way. And this climbing up performance into the future will continue. Service integration is only going to get greater as customers want more and more functionality, as we see more and more opportunity. Always on, of course, because we all depend on it all the time. And that means faster, more flexible delivery. As tech-enabled businesses, we have to get our services into the customer's hands as fast as possible. Autonomous devices are here today and a big part of the future. And that will require a very different kind of cloud. That will require a kind of smart networks. We're hoping to talk about on our Horizon Scan videos fairly shortly. This is a very different world. This isn't the big cloud in one place somewhere and we put all our services in it. This is a much more rich environment where we're responding to opportunity, new technologies, we're changing all the time, we're chasing more performance, we're improving our cost dynamics, more devices, more data. AI is just around the corner. We've had a lot of basic AI propositions already, but that's just the start of it. So this is the future that we see just over the horizon. And this is what we call dynamic cloud in action. And at Flexion, that's what we do. So thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to talk to you a little about this. And Simon, perhaps you'd lead us from here to some questions.
So first of all, let me thank Elcio and Peter for those insights into, where we see the cloud is at the moment, and what we see and what we learn from the customers and partners, both organizations work with on a daily basis. You've talked about some practicalities, Elcio. Peter, you've talked about a little bit, what's coming over the horizon. In your day-to-day experiences, as they're working with partners and customers, what do you think the top few, management priorities are that they are really grappling with to try and, make the most of the cloud both today and also prepare themselves to whatever tomorrow might be? Elcio, what are you seeing at LeaseWeb?
Well, I see that, and not specifically due to COVID, but I see that there is more and more a trend towards cost reduction, or at least cost control. So I think that's a very important one. I see that people are more looking to, like Peter also said, to not create one big cloud, but to really look at specific workloads and see what sort kind of hosting suits those needs best. So that's an important trend that I see, and that is something we discussed. And performance is something we discuss a lot. People always want more performance quicker. They have high compute demand, or they need quicker video starts, that kind of stuff. So performance is always a very important one.
Peter?
Interesting. One of the things that I've seen, particularly in the last 4 or 5 months, is that the immediate response of a decision maker to uncertainty is a desire for greater control and greater flexibility and choice. And it's a natural reaction when you're uncertain about the future. You want to make sure that you can do whatever you think is the right thing. And that relates to performance, that relates to cost, just the ability to choose what you do, and to make the businesses are needing to make large changes, even if they're just responding to an opportunity. They want to get on with it. They want to do it, and they want to be able to know which levers to move and how to get on with it. And I think I've seen some of the most disappointed decision makers when they feel trapped by what they've been doing, inadvertently perhaps, but they just don't have the choice and the control that they feel that they need. And as Elcio says, there's a number of things that relates into, that turns into, but I think that's the strongest driver right now, is the desire for choice and flexibility.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question coming from Steve Hill asking for a little bit more specifics about the two organizations, Flexion MSP and LeaseWeb. And he's asking, for example, what are the key differences between, for example, Flexion, what Flexion MSP has to offer in compared to other, established organizations. And likewise, Elcio, what's the differentiators for LeaseWeb, against, other global organizations? Peter, just maybe you'd like to just expand a little bit on differentiators from Flexion MSP's perspective.
Sure. MSP is a widely used term, but it means so many different things. To us, it means being on the customer side, resolving his problems, giving him as much flexibility, support and control as possible. In some ways, that's not differentiated. What is differentiated is that we are built in the cloud world for the cloud world. We are cloud experts. We've got a range of experts in all the cloud technologies, and we price like the cloud. Our prices scale as the cloud complexity of what the customer is doing. We don't price by the hour. So that, to us, it's all about empowering the customer and pricing it like the cloud.
Yeah. Elcio, how about LeaseWeb?
Yeah, good one. I would say the most important parts for us to distinguish ourselves from the rest of the market is definitely cost. And with cost, I don't mean so much purely the cost for a dedicated server or the cost for a VM, but the transparency in the cost. And the security you have that your bill will not go out of control. That is definitely something where we have a different approach than a lot of others. And next to that, we can also help, and that definitely differentiates us from a lot of others. We can also help with pre-sales and after sales to keep those costs under control. Another thing is performance. LeaseWeb has one of the highest performance networks there are in the market. And due to the combination of offering co-location, dedicated service, and cloud, we can also help customers in finding the highest performance for that specific workload that they want to put within in LeaseWeb. So I would say the mixture of these are definitely an important differentiators.
Excellent, thank you. Just before we move on to the next question, we've had an inquiry with regards to the availability of the recording of this event. I'd just like to tell everyone, yes, this event is being fully recorded, and we will make it available to everyone that's registered for today's event, and everyone will get an email with the appropriate link where they can access the recording of today's event. Got a question here from Philip, and I think Philip Ellis, and I think he's really referring to how we start this conversation off about some of those key management priorities that they are, the management teams are looking to address when talking about the cloud. And Philip asks, he says, if the likes of Twitter are being hacked, and let's assume that they work hard to protect their reputation and security, let's hope so. He says, what comfort can we have that our data is secure? And I think you'll both agree, security of data is becoming ever more important. So Elcho, what's your take on data security and how that's impacting on your customers?
Yeah, I can only answer this for a small bit. And the reason is that we offer purely the infrastructure, so we can help customers offering infrastructure that is secure, and then that can mean all kinds of physical security appliances and that kind of stuff. As customers are either managing the operating system themselves, or they ask Flexion MSP or another MSP to manage the operating system and all the data on top of it. That part I can't really answer therefore, because that's not completely in our hand. But data security, you now, Philip, mention it in the term of being hacked, but there's also another part where governments sometimes believe that they should get access to certain parts of your data. And that part, we can, what we do is that we secure that in the country where you host within LeaseWeb, we make sure that only the law from that country is applicable, which means that, and this is actually some way we also distinguish ourselves from the competition. Our headquarter is in the Netherlands, therefore we EU based. And that means that if the US government wants to get your data and you're not hosted within LeaseWeb US, we cannot that easily be forced to hand over the data like a US based can be forced to that. So there's the difference in that sense in purely being hacked, but there's also the chance that government or other government-like organizations get access to your data. And then the rest of the answer is probably for Peter, because that may, he can better tell a bit about application security.
Peter.
It's interesting. Twitter is a very big, very obvious target for hackers. And just as all the hyperscalers, the big branded cloud systems are, you know that if you can hack into Amazon or Azure, you can have a field day. There are thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands, probably millions of accounts there that you can mine. And much as with the world of viruses on machines, Apple machines are very much less susceptible to viruses because there are fewer of them, and therefore they're of less interest to hackers. Hackers concentrate on PCs because there are so many more to choose from. And in the same way, we find that although the infrastructure that we manage is probably getting bombarded by maybe 1,000 or 2 attempted intrusions a day. That's nothing like the millions and millions and millions that try to get into Amazon every day. So by positioning your infrastructure carefully with the right providers in the right way, you can present a smaller target to the hackers, a less obvious place to go. Now, they will always try. These things are driven by bots nowadays. They're not humans on the other end, they're machines. They go trawling the internet, trying to find things that they can break into. But our objective is to present the smallest possible window to the hackers for them to see. And that's the principle of defense in a number of things. It's what a stealth fighter does, for example.
Yeah, it occurs to me, Peter, that, you know, Peter and Elcio, we often talk about, you know, the robust nature of security. It seems to be, you know, that's the kind of the go-to position because the security of all different kinds of things. But I'm just wondering, in such a fluid and changing environment, how much more important choice and flexibility becomes with regards to flexibility and being able to choose, you know, with regards to security, you know, and being able to choose the most appropriate thing at the most appropriate time. Have you got any thought about, you know, choice and flexibility, Peter?
Yes, we do need to differentiate between security and privacy. The two are different things. But the more we depend on data and the more of it we have, the more careful we've got to be with it. And security, to me, is somebody can't get at it. They can't fiddle with it. They can't change it. Privacy is they can't see it, and they're two different things. And it's important to take a top-down view of these things, particularly when you're wanting to be flexible in your delivery and how you structure your infrastructure. You have to take an overall view so that you capture the whole thing from a security and privacy perspective. We're now launching with a fintech business internationally, first in South Africa. They go live this week and then off to India. This is a fintech proposition with headquarters in London, where privacy and policy is set, but deployment in each of these countries. We have to take with them a very careful view of security and privacy, because that's a very rich environment, but they need the flexibility. So they have to take a strategic view of it. It's not something you add on later. It's not something you do piece by piece. It's something you take a top-down view to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think just to move that conversation along a little bit about, you know, flexibility and choice. You know, I think both organisations, Flexion MSP and LeaseWeb, would probably position themselves, you know, right in that soft spot. But I mean, Elcio, would you like to just talk a little bit more about, you know, how you complement, you know, the big organisations like, you know, the Azures, the AWSs, that many organizations rely on, but how does LeaseWeb complement, you know, that environment and give people flexibility and choice to choose exactly what they want when they need it?
Yeah, well, actually, that's a very good one in combination with flexibility. For us, it's key, and the whole LeaseWeb organization is managed that way internally as well, that you don't have login into one supplier. So it's really important that you only use technologies that can be easily moved from one provider to another. Otherwise, you create a lock-in. This is also one of the reasons why we believe it's important to set up your infrastructure as a hybrid cloud, because that means that you have flexibility to move if you need to get away from a certain provider for whatever reason. It can be security. It can be all kinds of reasons. It can be cost, security, performance, high availability that you're not completely happy with. It can be all kinds of reasons that you make sure that your infrastructure is that flexible that you can easily move your infrastructure to another provider. So in that sense, flexibility for me is a very important topic.
Absolutely. I find it really interesting, listen to this, this short webinar today. I think that the term locked in or lock in has been used quite a few times by both Elcio and Peter. And, I remember the days when, the internet came out and we kind of thought vendor lock-in was a thing of the past because the internet would give us ultimate choice and we could move wherever we wanted to go. And the old days of being locked into one big vendor, being unable to move, was behind us. But it's quite clear that vendor lock-in is not behind us. It's a very real issue that we all have to keep an eye on. I mean, Peter, maybe you'd like to just expand a little bit on, vendor lock-in and flexibility and choices as you see it from Flexion MSP's perspective.
Yeah, you're right. It is interesting, isn't it? The challenge is always how can you get the best without being vulnerable to what that means, and there are a number of aspects to lock-in. One, in this world, no one provider has got the answer to everything. And the reason we started working with Elcio and his team over at LeaseWeb is they do several things exceptionally well. And what we look to do is when those things are what a customer needs, we want to be able to put those with LeaseWeb. But that doesn't mean LeaseWeb does everything well. I think everything LeaseWeb does, it does well, but it doesn't do everything. And this is the world that new services are becoming available all the time. If you lock yourself in, you deny yourself all of those possibilities. If you lock yourself in, you make yourself vulnerable to the vagaries of what that provider might decide to let you have or not let you have. We've had customers who've suddenly found that a particular service has discontinued something that they relied on, and that they're absolutely stuffed. Well, that's no good. As Elcio says, you need to be able to move if you want to move. Well, why shouldn't you? Of course you should. And there are lots of tricks. I call them tricks. That's probably pejorative. No, I'll call them tricks. Lots of mechanisms to keep people in one place. And this is something you have to guard against from the outset.
And in the past, if I can answer it a bit as well, Peter, in the past you were mainly talking about technical lock-ins, but what we see nowadays as well, that there are certain providers that offer you free data to store into their cloud, but to get that data ever out of their cloud is not free anymore. And therefore, it will become really hard to ever get your data out of the cloud because there is no business case to make to get it out. So it is not only a technical login nowadays anymore, it can also become a financial login.
The worst position is to be facing ever rising costs, which you can't control, but which are determined by what your customers are demanding of your service, combined with ever increasing cost of moving. And that's a hideous spiral to be in. Yes. I can't stay, but I can't leave. And I'm not saying that any one provider is the wrong thing. I'm saying as a decision maker, I would like to be able to choose. I might have all sorts of reasons for wanting to move. It might be that, as I said, one of our customers put everything he had in Amazon, only to find he got some new customers who demanded services from Azure. Well, how does he respond to that? You just, as a decision maker in business, you need to be able to make decisions, because this is what a decision maker does. And if they're made for you, you're not in a happy place.
Absolutely. I just keep an eye on our time because we don't want to overrun. So maybe I'd like to just let's draw today to a conclusion. You know, maybe asking or trying to answer what I would consider quite a challenging question. You know, it's one of those interview questions. Tell me what you're bad at. And I'm just wondering, are there any compromises out there that management just have to grapple with, that, you know, I'm going to have to make a compromise? That may be a compromise. Now, we can't talk about the compromises from the end user's perspective because they're all different. We can't talk about a specific company because every company, as I said, is different. But how do you see an environment in which companies of a certain type may just have to compromise on that to get what they want? Or is everything now available to them if they follow a certain path? Peter, compromise or no compromise?
Depends who you are. If you're a startup, a true startup, not Uber startup, but, you know, 2 men and a whiteboard, then what compromise is there? Well, maybe there's a compromise in how much cash you've got, what investments you make, but those are all compromises, if you like, that are yours to make. If you're a business that's rolling, that's got momentum, this is when what you did in the past constrains you today. And I think the situation Elche was describing earlier is one where decision makers are faced with the realities of today, which usually come about because of the decisions they took yesterday and what's happened since. You know, how has my infrastructure and my approach to it changed as much as the world around me? And that's the compromise of today is driven by the decisions of yesterday. And that's why those decisions must be taken extremely carefully with the future in mind, and not in a rush to take the least, you know, the path of least resistance. Elche?
Yeah, Elche.
Yeah, I think that's said very nicely. The only thing I can add to that is that what might be a bit of a compromise is that if you indeed want the flexibility, then there is a bit of and then I'm talking about the flexibility to be able to move away and not have that login, and so meaning that it might be good to set up a hybrid cloud. Then the compromise might be that you can't use all the features of one single provider, because that automatically will bring you into a login. So that's sometimes maybe the compromise you have to make to stay flexible. So there's definitely sometimes a payout between them.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, Elche and Peter, thank you for that. Before I just close down today's event, are there any final parting shots, comments you'd just like to, you know, share with our audience today? Sorry.
Oh,
Wisdom.
Who knows what tomorrow may bring?
Good one.
Back in January, who would have thought we'd be here now? The answer is none of us. And we have to set about our decisions based on that reality.
Yeah. Elche.
No, I completely agree. And although my marketing department always forbids me, I always take the liberty. If you feel after this webinar that it might be good to have a conversation, I'm always open for a conversation to see what we can do for you.
Absolutely, and it's not a liberty, it's absolutely fine. So look, guys, I'd like to really thank the two of you for your time this lunchtime. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We know you're all busy, and this is one of the reasons we choose the time we choose, because, you know, hopefully it's the opportunity for people just take a short time out of their day to join us and you know, share some thoughts. So on that note, thank you everyone, and we'll see you in a future event. Thank you very much and goodbye.